On March 1st, 2024, two movies would be released. One of these movies was a highly anticipated sequel, one of the most highly anticipated movies of the year in general, and the first big blockbuster of 2024. The other movie was Dune Part 2. That's right, lads. Today we're going to be talking about the new Megamind sequel that came out recently, Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate, a movie that has gotten less than stellar reviews from the animation community. Let's just put it that way. Now, a while back, I made a video talking about the trailer for this film when it first dropped, which that video received a lot of attention. It received a lot of support, and I just want to say thank you to everyone who watched that video. Thank you to those who've decided to support this channel because of that video. I didn't expect that video to become as big as it did, but it was a welcome surprise nonetheless, and I really cannot thank you guys enough for the support that video received. To basically sum things up, this year it was announced that we were getting both a Megamind sequel and a Megamind TV show. A trailer was released for this sequel, and it received very negative reviews from the animation community. Now, it's important for me to note that the first Megamind was released in 2010. It didn't really get that much attention when it first came out, but then sometime in the early 2020s, it started receiving a cult following and a critical re-evaluation, with many people considering it this underrated gem within Dreamworks' library of movies. Many people believe that Megamind deserved better, and that it should have became a big franchise for Dreamworks alongside Shrek and How to Train Your Dragon and Madagascar and whatever. A lot of people wanted to see Megamind make a comeback. A lot of people wanted to see Megamind return in some way. A lot of people wanted to see a sequel of sorts to Megamind. And our wishes were seemingly heard in early 2022 when it was announced that a new Megamind TV series was in the works. Although it did have a bit of a questionable premise, to say the least, as the show was going to revolve around Megamind trying to become an influencer superhero. Yeah, I'm not sure about that one, Chief. In retrospect, this should have been our first red flag for the future of Megamind, but unfortunately, we didn't think much of it at the time. 2 years would pass, and there would be no updates at all regarding Megamind's future. We would receive no updates about this show at all. A lot of people would just go on to forget about this show. A lot of people would forget, oh yeah, we're getting a new Megamind show at some point. I wouldn't be surprised if there were people that thought that this whole thing got cancelled for some reason. Because literally, between February of 2022 and February of 2024, there were zero updates on Megamind's future. Everything changed in February of 2024 when a trailer was released for a new Megamind project. Only this wasn't a trailer for the TV series. That was still a thing that was happening, but this was for a different project. This was for a Megamind sequel, an official Megamind 2 that serves as a, I guess you could say, pilot to the Megamind show. And keep in mind, the first movie came out in November of 2010. This one was expected to come out in March of 2024. We had to wait 13 years for an official Megamind follow-up, and this is what we get. A lot of people criticized this trailer. A lot of people criticized how cheap the animation looks when compared to the first movie. A lot of people criticized the fact that none of the voice actors from the first movie, particularly Will Ferrell as the titular Megamind, would return for this sequel. A lot of people criticized the fact that there were various details from the first movie that were seemingly retconned from this sequel. A lot of people were not happy about how this sequel was going to turn out, and we were not looking forward to March 1st, 2024. Eventually, though, the big day arrived. Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate would finally be released, and upon its release, it actually received a lot of great reviews. A lot of cartoon YouTubers praised the movie as being a subversive classic on par with the first movie, and that it was just simply marketed poorly, and that was all. The trailer made the movie out to be worse than it actually was. It was then that the animation community learned a valuable lesson not to judge a book by its cover, and yeah, no, none of that happened at all. I'm just f***ing with y'all. This movie is garbage. It's trash. I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised. I'm gonna go ahead and say something. I honestly think this might be the worst movie of 2024. Now, I know I've said that 3 separate times already, but this time I truly believe this is the worst movie of 2024. I think this is worse than Madam Web. And I know that, like, some people will say, like, whoa, hey there, I think Megamind 2 is bad as well, but, like, it cannot be worse than Madam Web. It is, in a way, worse than Madam Web. And that says a lot, because Madam Web was f***ing awful. But here's the difference. Here's what makes Madam Web slightly less bad than Megamind 2. Nobody expected Madam Web to be good. That's the difference. Nobody looked at Madam Web and thought, oh, this is going to be a great movie. I can't wait for it. I did not go into Madam Web expecting it to be a good movie. I went into it knowing that it was going to be garbage, but I thought it was going to be entertainingly garbage. I thought it was going to be like a funny bad movie, something that I could enjoy ironically, something similar to like Morbius from 2022. The movie ended up subverting my expectations. It was still bad, but it was just boring and uninteresting more than anything else. There was just nothing interesting going on in this movie. But again, that doesn't really matter, because I don't think there was anyone that thought this movie would be unironically good. A lot of people wanted to see a Megamind sequel happen. A lot of people were disappointed by the quality of this movie. A lot of people really hoped that this would end up being good, and it just ends up not being good at all. And I think in that regard, that makes Megamind 2 worse than Madam Web. I'm not even angry at this movie. More than anything else, I'm just disappointed by it. It's just such a sad, pathetic little movie. And so today we're going to be talking about why it's not a very good movie. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. And with all that said, let us dive in. Now, in the original video that I made for the trailer of this movie, I talked about how there were a lot of similarities between this movie and Incredibles 2. For time purposes, I'm just gonna put on screen all the similarities that both movies have. You can pause the video if you like. As it turns out though, there's another similarity between the two movies. The first Incredibles ended with the family getting ready to confront the Underminer, and then Incredibles 2 begins with the family confronting the Underminer. With Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate, it's implied very early on that this movie takes place only 2 days after the events of the first Megamind. Now, there are a lot of reasons as to why this doesn't add up at all, but I'll go into that much later on. The movie begins with Megamind and Minion, who has been renamed to Chum, Old Chum, in this movie. The in-universe explanation for why they changed Minion's name is because of a cease and desist letter that they received from a restaurant that had the word Minion in its name. It's really stupid. I think we all know the real reason why they changed Minion's name. It's because of Despicable Me. Keep in mind, the first Despicable Me was released only a few months before the first Megamind, and it was a far more successful movie. Considering the fact that Dreamworks is now owned by Universal, who also owns Illumination, the studio behind Despicable Me, you would think they would keep Minion's name the same, because then it's not like Illumination's gonna sue or anything like that. It's Universal suing Universal, basically. But whatever, I digress. Maybe that's not how it works. I don't know, nor do I care. I'm still gonna call him Minion for the rest of this video. I don't care. Anyways, the movie begins with Megamind and Minion trying to stop the Go Fish Gang, one of the new villains introduced into this movie. Now, this movie is bad. I'm gonna say that right there. This movie is garbage, but to give it just a little bit of credit, There are ideas in this movie that could work for a Megamind sequel. The Go Fish gang criticized the fact that Megamind and Minion have now turned to the good side and now they've become superheroes, which that could actually work as an idea. There's all these other villains in Metro City and they hate the fact that Megamind is a good guy now. They hate the fact that Megamind's a superhero. They feel betrayed by that fact. That's a great concept for a Megamind sequel. That has a lot of potential. And it's such a shame that it's so badly executed in this movie, because that could really work. The whole idea that like there's all these villains that they feel betrayed by Megamind turning over to the good side and becoming a superhero now. Anyways, the Go Fish gang try to steal this fish from an aquarium. Luckily though, Megamind and Minion both managed to stop the Go Fish gang. So then the next day, Megamind gives out a speech feeling honored about how he's the new hero of Metro City, and it is then that we get another new character introduced into this movie. This kid who's meant to be like an influencer obsessed with Megamind or something, and it's just super cringe. I'm sorry, I just gotta be real with y'all about that. I have no idea why they decide to include a character like this into the movie. Maybe to have it appeal to the current generation. Maybe this is like a how do you do fellow kids sort of thing, but like, I don't even know if this could really be classified as that. It's important to keep in mind, this movie came out over 13 years after the first Megamind, and although the first Megamind is now retrospectively seen as one of the best Dreamworks movies, that wasn't the case when it first came out. Megamind was always seen as a good movie, but it wasn't really that huge. It was one of the lowest grossing Dreamworks movies of the 2010s, and it would become largely forgotten about until its critical re-evaluation around the early 2020s. And even then, Megamind is still fairly niche when compared to like Shrek or How to Train Your Dragon, Madagascar, Kung Fu Panda, those movies. I don't really think there's gonna be any kid now that's part of Generation Alpha that's gonna know a whole lot about Megamind. That's what makes it so baffling that like this movie feels like it's made exclusively for kids. This feels even more like a kid's movie than the first Megamind. The first Megamind was a movie that anyone of any age could enjoy, and I'll explain this in greater detail later on into the video, but it's one of those movies where like you appreciate it more the older you get. When you're a kid, you think it's good, but then when you're an adult, you realize it's actually better than you initially thought it was. This movie, in contrast, feels like it was made primarily towards kids. I don't think there's gonna be any, like, teenager or adult that's gonna get any sort of enjoyment out of this movie. Then again, though, I don't think there's gonna be any kid that'll get enjoyment out of this movie either. Because number one, I don't think there are that many kids from this generation that knows what Megamind is. And number two, this movie is boring and not funny. This influencer kid that's obsessed with Megamind is just, it comes off as a desperate attempt to appeal to the modern generation. A desperate attempt to bring Megamind to a newer generation. And it fails very miserably. After this speech, and after we are introduced to the annoying influencer kid, we get one of the two main plots of this movie. Minion decides he wants to become a sidekick, a full-on sidekick for Megamind. However, Megamind decides to let him go. Let Minion go off and do his own thing, while Megamind goes around saving the city and protecting it. Which honestly feels really out of character for Megamind to do, especially considering the fact that, remember, this allegedly takes place only 2 days after the events of the first movie. In the first movie, there was that third act breakup between Megamind and Minion, where Megamind decides he doesn't want to be the bad guy anymore. And then not long after that, Megamind and Minion get back together. So that just makes this whole thing even weirder. If there was a time skip between the first movie and this movie, then this wouldn't be as bad of a problem. If this was like a year later or something, 2 years later, I don't know, then it would be fine. But no, this is supposed to be 2 days later. This is supposed to be 2 days after Megamind and Minion reunited and defeated Titan and decided to become heroes. Man, you gotta love that nice retconning, man. You really gotta love it. As a result of this, for better or worse, you barely see Minion in the entire movie. After this, we cut to a prison where we see a group of supervillains, the titular Doom Syndicate from the movie's title. Upon seeing a news report of Megamind becoming a superhero on TV, they break out of prison and decide to pay him a visit. The Doom Syndicate believes that Megamind is tricking the entirety of Metro City by pretending to be a hero, so that when the right time comes, Megamind will reveal that he was still a villain all along, and that he had not changed even after everything that went on with Titan in the first movie. Now, all of this doesn't sound too bad. The idea of there being villains that still think Megamind is evil, and that he's simply pretending to be a hero, is, again, that's a good concept. That's another idea that actually has potential for a Megamind sequel. Again though, the execution is really poor, and there is one very simple reason why. One small detail that completely ruins the whole thing with the Doom Syndicate and whatever. It's revealed that Megamind used to be a part of the Doom Syndicate. As a matter of fact, he was the leader of the Doom Syndicate. It's not even a plot twist or anything like that. They literally say this in the trailer for the movie. I mean, to be fair, it's not like this would be any better if it was a plot twist or anything like that. This is just blatant retconning of the first movie. In the first movie, Megamind didn't have anyone. He was alone. All he had was Minion, and that's it. During his childhood at school, nobody liked him. He tried to fit in, but he was unable to. Everyone loved Metro Man, no one liked Megamind. And he was alone as a result of that. And then later on into the movie, after successfully defeating Metro Man and taking over Metro City, he eventually starts to wonder if it was worth defeating Metro Man. He would start to miss the days when his plans would get thwarted by Metro Man. Combine that with the fact that now that he's taken over Metro City, nobody likes him, everyone hates him, everyone is scared for their lives that Megamind might do something bad to them, which only makes him feel even more lonely than before. He didn't have a crew, it was just him and Minion, and that was it. That's why the first movie worked. He was alone, nobody liked him, everyone hated him. Even after he took over Metro City, that just made people hate him even more. This whole Megamind had an old crew nonsense is just blatant retconning of the first movie, and it takes away from what made it good. And going back to what I said earlier about how the first Megamind is one of those movies where you appreciate it a lot more as you get older, it hits you hard the way the movie handles Megamind's loneliness. He has finally achieved his dreams, he has successfully defeated Metro Man, and he has taken over Metro City. But at what cost? Even more people hate him now than they already did before. People are now more scared for their lives than before. People are now more scared that Megamind could do something bad to them. You think that's good when you're a kid, but when you're much older, you really start to appreciate it a whole lot more. Not just for how great the execution is, but also just for how clever of a subversion it is of the whole, like, good guy versus bad guy trope for superhero movies. Keep in mind that this movie came out during a time when superhero movies were still somewhat niche in a way. The MCU was still a very new thing when this movie first came out. Iron Man and The Dark Knight both changed superhero movies when they came out in 2008, but I would argue that the superhero genre didn't explode into massive popularity until The Avengers came out in 2012. So when the first Megamind came out, it was still a semi-niche genre. And then you look at how it is nowadays. Superhero movies are now getting criticized for feeling stale and formulaic, which only makes the themes of Megamind feel even more fresh and unique in retrospect. If the first Megamind came out today, it would be seen as one of those breath of fresh air superhero movies. People would be bringing it up alongside the Spider-Verse movies or the Batman or whatever. People would be using it as a counterclaim to the whole superhero movies aren't real cinema stuff from Martin Scorsese. It was ahead of its time in a lot of different ways. While we're at it, I'm just gonna say, this sort of clever writing that the first movie had, yeah, it's not in this sequel. It just feels like a generic kids movie. There's nothing unique or fresh or anything like that. It's just so generic and boring. So anyways, the Doom Syndicate ends up finding out that Megamind actually is a hero and that he's not pretending to be one at all. Apparently back when Megamind was part of the Doom Syndicate, he had this whole plan where he would launch Metro City up into the moon or whatever. So it turns out that there's these rocket thrusters that are underneath the city. Megamind realizes that he's unable to work alone, and so he teams up with Roxanne, Minion, and the annoying influencer girl as they try to stop the Doom Syndicate. However, they end up being unsuccessful. They manage to launch Metro City up into the air. Eventually, though, they are able to stop Metro City from flying up to the moon. However, now the city starts falling back down to Earth. Somehow, gravity isn't affected by this at all. Like, you would think everyone in Metro City, Megamind, and whatever, all the civilians there, they would start flying off, like floating, because they're all like falling from the air, but I guess not. I don't know, okay? I don't know why I'm questioning the logic of the physics in Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate. This is what my life has become now. And then eventually Megamind manages to safely land the city back to Earth. He also manages to stop the Doom Syndicate. And then at the end of the movie, there's some going on where Roxanne becomes the mayor of Metro City, and I really don't care, to be honest. This isn't even like a mayor storyline in this movie where it's like Roxanne wants to be more than just a news reporter. No, there's nothing like that. At the very end of the movie, there's this whole thing where it's like Roxanne, along with the others, risk their lives to save Metro City, while the real mayor at the time was cowarding, hiding, not doing anything to prevent the situation, blah blah blah. And so at the end, Roxanne just becomes mayor of Metro City. Sure, why the not, I guess. The movie then has the gall to end with a post-credits scene. The Doom Syndicate are back in prison. However, this time they are visited by this purple brain robot thing that just, I don't know why, but this reminds me of like Jimmy Neutron. Like the design looks like something out of Jimmy Neutron, I don't know why. The Doom Syndicate asks who this is, and as it turns out, this was who taught Megamind to become a villain, which again, that's retconning the first movie, because in the first movie, he was raised by prisoners. There were prisoners that were raising him as a baby to be evil. This is very clearly trying to be sequel baiting. I don't know if this is explored in the Megamind Rules TV show. I haven't watched that yet. So if this is like something that's connected to Megamind Rules, then, well, I'll have no way of knowing until I actually watch Megamind Rules. But if this is unrelated to Megamind Rules, and this is meant to be for like a hypothetical Megamind 3, then yeah, no thanks. We're good. I think maybe it would have been better if Megamind stayed as just a one-time thing and that's it. Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate is the worst movie of 2024. Although I would argue that Madam Web is a far more incompetent and poorly made movie, I think this movie is worse on the basis that, again, nobody expected Madam Web to be good, whereas this was something that people were hoping would be good. It was announced that we were getting a follow-up to Megamind, and naturally, we were excited. We wanted this to be good. We wanted Megamind to become a bigger franchise, which is how it should have been from the start. Megamind should have been one of the big franchises for Dreamworks alongside Shrek and Kung Fu Panda and whatever, but it ended up never happening. Trolls and Boss Baby became proper franchises before Megamind, which is just to make things even more insulting. You know what? I would be willing to forgive the poor quality animation and the fact that like none of the voice actors from the first movie are back in this movie. I would be willing to forgive both of those things if the writing for the movie was still good. It's not. All the clever themes that the first film had, it's not in this movie at all. It just feels like an extremely generic kids movie. It is so generic that like it becomes kind of offensive in how generic it is. There was an article that came out recently from the director of the movie where he gave an interview or something, and he was talking about how there was like budget issues between this movie and the show. Apparently they had to split the budget for the movie and the show, which could be kind of the reason why both of these are in very poor quality. And admittedly, there's a small part of me that feels bad for being like super harsh and critical of this movie when you take that into consideration. But then at the same time though, we would have been okay with only a sequel or only a TV show. We didn't need both things. And again, having a low budget does not excuse bad writing. Having a low budget could excuse the inferior quality of the animation when compared to the first movie. Having a low budget could excuse the fact that like Will Ferrell isn't back to voice Megamind because it would cost too much to get him back because Will Ferrell is a celebrity. Having a low budget does not excuse the poor quality writing and the blatant retconning of important details from the first movie. I could be wrong on this, but I don't think there's much of a correlation between having a low budget and having bad writing. I'm sure there are a ton of low budget indie movies out there that have great writing in them, and there are for sure a lot of big budget Hollywood blockbuster movies that have terrible writing in them. I mean, look at the modern MCU, for crying out loud. Look at most modern MCU movies if you want an example of the latter. If this movie came out in theaters and it had the same animation quality that the first movie had, and it also had Will Ferrell reprising the role of Megamind and David Cross reprising the role of Minion and etc., but then the writing was still bad. The writing was the same. All the retcons to the first movie were still present in the movie would still be bad, even if it was higher budget. Even if it had the same animation quality as the first film, and it had the voice actors from the first film come back, the movie would still be bad, simply because the writing is bad. That is the main issue that I have with this movie. They took Megamind, an underrated gem within DreamWorks' library of films, and they turned it into this miraculous ladybug bullshit. They turned it into f***ing Paw Patrol. That is just insulting. Oh yeah, I realize I didn't go into any detail at all about the titular Doom Syndicate, so I'll just briefly talk about them. You have this weather girl who, yeah, she sucks. That's about it, really. You know, I keep making miraculous ladybug comparisons, but I swear, like, there was a girl, like a evil weather girl or some shit in Miraculous Ladybug. I only know about this because I tried watching Miraculous Ladybug a few years ago because I wanted to see what the big deal was with it. F***ing garbage show, I'm not gonna lie. And then you have Bon Voyage from The Incredibles over here, who there's literally nothing to say about him. You have this magma lava monster that also sucks, and then you have probably the only good member of the Doom Syndicate, and maybe the sole redeeming factor of this movie, Lord Nighty Night. who's I guess meant to be like the comic relief of the four. I don't know. He's the only one of the four Doom Syndicate members that I don't find to be painfully cringy, so there's that. He has this superpower where he can grab shadows and manipulate them to like attack people, which is actually another cool idea that I wish was in a much better movie. If anything, it just reminds me of that canceled Dreamworks movie about that guy and his shadow. The fact that he has that admittedly cool superpower, I think makes him the least bad of the Doom Syndicate. But none of these villains are like memorable when compared to Titan. It's obvious that there's going to be comparisons to Titan. The Doom Syndicate is just seemingly evil for the sake of being evil. It would have been nice if we got like a backstory for these four characters, but we don't. We don't have any sort of backstory at all. They're just seemingly evil just because. We learn nothing about these characters and why they're evil. All we know about them is they're evil, and that's it. And as a result of that, they end up becoming super forgettable and generic when compared to Titan. Titan had a full character arc. He started off as this nerdy guy who had a crush on Roxanne, and then eventually he got superpowers thanks to Megamind, and then rather than use those superpowers to protect Metro City and become the next Metro Man, he instead uses them to try and impress Roxanne, and then when that ends up failing, he becomes a villain. Nothing like that at all happens with the Doom Syndicate. We learn nothing about these characters, we learn nothing about like why they're evil, and as a result of that, they're just forgettable. They're generic Saturday morning cartoon villains. That's what they are. I mean, at least there's no twist villains or anything like that in this movie, but like, that's not really saying much. That's the bare minimum, if anything. I remember reading something that apparently the Doom Syndicate was supposed to be in the first movie. Like, it was a concept for the first movie, but they ended up having to scrap it because they thought that there were too many plots, storylines, whatever, for the first movie. And then apparently in some of the Megamind video games, they include the Doom Syndicate in them. There were 3 Megamind games that were released onto various different systems, so I don't know which ones feature the Doom Syndicate. I don't know if they all feature the Doom Syndicate, but yeah, this was a concept that it was originally meant to be in the first movie, but it wasn't, and then it got repurposed for the Megamind video games, and then it got repurposed for this sequel. And as I said in the original video covering the trailer, I'm not against the storyline of this movie where the Doom Syndicate thinks that Megamind is pretending to be a good guy, and they don't realize that he actually is a good guy now. That could work for a Megamind sequel. If it weren't for that one little detail where, oh yeah, Megamind used to be a part of the Doom Syndicate, this would be fine. There would be no problems with this at all. One little detail is enough to completely ruin the plot of this movie. What they could have done was, instead of having Megamind originally be part of the Doom Syndicate, they could have it so that the Doom Syndicate tries to recruit Megamind into it. Try and convince Megamind to become a villain again. Megamind initially pretends to be a villain, but then as the film goes by and more crimes are committed throughout Metro City, Megamind eventually suffers a relapse and becomes a villain again. Have the Doom Syndicate manipulate Megamind into becoming a villain again. There you go. I just fixed the plot of this movie by just making one small change to the plot. Instead of having Megamind be a former member of the Doom Syndicate, have the Doom Syndicate try and manipulate Megamind into becoming a part of it. There you go. I fixed the plot of this movie. You can still keep the Doom Syndicate plot while also not retconning any important details from the first movie. This just further shows that there's no correlation at all between the low budget of this movie and the bad writing it has. One random guy on the internet could come up with a simple solution to the movie's plot, allowing it to work while also not retconning anything from the first movie. That's just embarrassing, really. That is just seriously embarrassing. What a disappointment of a movie, really. Again, I'm not even angry at this movie. I'm not even like angry. I'm not yelling at the top of my lungs being like, how could they ruin Megamind? How could they do this? What were they thinking? I'm not even doing that. I'm disappointed more than anything else. This is just f***ing sad. This is just pathetic. I think a big part of what makes this movie feel so insulting is that we had to wait an extremely long time for this movie. If this came out much closer to the first Megamind, if this came out around like 2012 or 2013, it would still be bad, but like, it wouldn't be like as bad in a way. The fact that we had to wait over 10 years for Megamind to get a follow-up, I think makes this even more insulting. This feels like some cheap direct-to-DVD movie that I would find in a Walmart bargain bin in 2014. I'm not disrespecting the people behind this movie. I have no doubt that maybe there were good intentions behind this movie. But I have to wonder, was it really worth it at the end of the day? After over 10 years, this underrated Dreamworks movie finally gets a follow-up, and it ends up being really bad. And then this sequel is very likely just going to be forgotten about. Nobody is going to remember this movie years on from now. This isn't going to be like Food Fight or the Emoji Movie or whatever, where it's going to live on in infamy. No, this movie will be forgotten about. I will be amazed if people still remember this movie's existence by the end of 2024. I will be amazed if by December of this year, people remember, oh yeah, we got a new Megamind sequel this year that was really bad. Nobody's going to remember this movie. Nobody will remember it at all. It's the big thing to hate on right now within the animation community, but eventually it's gonna fade away into irrelevancy. It's gonna fade away into obscurity. I've seen people say that like this movie is going to ruin the legacy that the first Megamind left behind. It's not. Obviously, people are still going to remember the first Megamind. People are still going to remember it as this underrated Dreamworks classic, a movie that deserves so much better. Nobody is going to remember this sequel. Nobody is going to remember it at all. This movie is just going to come and go, and that's it. I'm not even angry at this. I'm just disappointed more than anything else. I loved the first Megamind a lot when I was growing up, and I always wanted to see it get a sequel. I always wanted to see it become one of the big Dreamworks movies alongside like Madagascar and whatever. And it sucks that it never did. It really does. I'm aware that I haven't talked about Megamind Rules, the TV show, which as I said before, I haven't watched Megamind Rules yet. I would love to watch it and make a video talking about how bad it is, but unfortunately I'm extremely busy with a huge video that I would rather finish first before I make any more videos reviewing cartoons, so yeah, just stay tuned for that. Considering the fact that the cartoon is getting nowhere near the level of backlash that the sequel is getting, I'd say this TV show is going to feel a lot more fresh to talk about when compared to Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate. But that's a story for another day. Anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I will see you all next time. Adios. At the beginning of this month, Megamind, the cult classic Dreamworks movie from 2010, made quite a bit of a comeback, although not in the way that people had expected. We received a Megamind sequel and a Megamind TV show, and both of these things had been largely criticized by the animation community for a multitude of reasons. Number one, the animation quality for both of these was a lot cheaper when compared to the original movie. Number two, none of the voice actors from the original movie reprised their roles for either of these, particularly Will Ferrell as the titular Megamind. And number three, arguably the most important reason, there were several details from the first movie, several important details that were just seemingly retconned out of both of these projects. Throughout the early 2020s, as the first Megamind started getting a cult following, more and more people wanted to see this underrated Dreamworks movie make a comeback in some way, shape, or form. And alas, we did eventually receive a comeback, but unfortunately the monkey's paw struck again and the comeback ended up being not very good. I've already made a video talking about the sequel, Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate, and I'm just gonna say I highly recommend you watch that video before you watch this video if you haven't watched that video already, as this show is supposed to be a follow-up to Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate. So if you haven't watched the Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate video that I made, then well, I highly recommend you watch that video before you watch this video. I noticed that of these two things, this was the less hated one of the two. I mean, people still think it's bad. It has a very low score on IMDb, but in comparison to the Doom Syndicate movie, no one really talks about it all that much. I don't think there's that many videos talking about how bad it is when compared to the Doom Syndicate movie. So I figured, you know what, I think that'll allow for this to be a more fresh video in comparison. Talk about something that not a lot of people have talked about. So I sat down and I watched all 8 episodes of Megamind Rules, and I'm quite surprised by the fact that I don't hate it as much as I probably should. Let me preface this by saying that I don't think Megamind Rules is a good show. Far from it. But it could be a lot worse, honestly. It's not as bad as the Doom Syndicate movie. It's obviously nowhere near as good as the original Megamind, but it's still not that awful in a way. If I were to make a Megamind tier list, the original film and the Button of Doom would both go on S tier. Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate would go on F tier. This would probably be like, I don't know, C tier maybe. I haven't played all of the Megamind games. I've only played the DS one. It's okay, I guess. It's not amazing. It's fine. B tier. That's where I will put it. B tier. A lot of the things that made Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate bad are also present in Megamind Rules. However, it feels a lot more forgivable for Megamind Rules considering the fact that it's a show. For one thing, the animation quality is much cheaper when compared to the original Megamind, that's fine for this because this is a TV show. I don't think there's ever been an instance where there's a TV show that's based on an animated movie and it has the same animation quality as the original animated movie. Like, you think about Madagascar, for example. You think about like that Penguins of Madagascar cartoon from Nickelodeon. You compare the animation quality of the real Madagascar movies to the animation quality of Penguins of Madagascar, and obviously there's a huge difference in the quality. The Penguins of Madagascar has much cheaper looking animation, and that's normal because the budget for the Penguins of Madagascar is much lower than it is for the real Madagascar movies. So obviously, it's not going to have the same animation quality as the original movies. Megamind not being voiced by Will Ferrell in this show also feels a lot more forgiving because, again, it is extremely rare for there to be a cartoon based on an animated movie that has the original voice actor, the original celebrity voice actors from that animated movie reprise the role and voice the character that they voiced. Like, there was a Kung Fu Panda cartoon that aired on Nickelodeon in the early 2010s. I'm not sure how many of y'all are gonna remember it, but there was a Kung Fu Panda cartoon on Nickelodeon. It's extremely obscure, but it did happen, and it didn't have Jack Black in it. It didn't have Jack Black voicing Poe in it. I could be wrong on this, but I think there's another Kung Fu Panda cartoon that came out after that had Jack Black in it, but I'm not sure, to be honest. And then using another example, I'm not sure how many of y'all are gonna remember this, but there was an Emperor's New Groove cartoon back in the mid-2000s, and it had a lot of the voice actors from the movie return. Like, he had like Patrick Warburton voicing Kronk, for example, but David Spade didn't come back to voice Kuzco. They instead got someone else that sounded like David Spade to voice Kuzco for this show. This is actually kind of normal. This is pretty standard stuff for when it comes to making cartoons based on animated movies. If a character is voiced by a celebrity, then they just get someone else that sounds like that celebrity to voice the character. They can't get the original celebrity voice actor to come back because it'll cost too much money. It'll be too expensive. So instead, they just get someone else that sounds like the celebrity voice actor to voice the character. I'm not really sure why this is such a big deal for Megamind when this is like a normal thing that usually usually happens. It's unacceptable for the sequel, but for the TV show it feels more normal, like it's fine in a way. The retcons to the first movie are still present in this show though, which sucks, and it's extra unfortunate because that was the main issue that I had with the Doom Syndicate movie. I didn't really care as much about the bad animation or the different voice actors when compared to the retcons. Those were the main issue that I had with the Doom Syndicate movie. This movie could have had the same animation quality as the first Megamind, and it could have had Will Ferrell and David Cross come back to voice Megamind and Minion respectively, but if the retcons were still there, then the movie would still be bad, just like that. Even if it had the original voice actors and it had better animation, the movie would still be bad, simply because of the retcons. To be fair though, the retcons aren't there in this show as much when compared to the Doom Syndicate movie. They are still there, but they're not as present as in the Doom Syndicate movie. As stated before, this is meant to be a follow-up, a continuation of the Doom Syndicate movie. The titular Doom Syndicate do return in this show in a few episodes, and the main issue that I and so many other people had with the Doom Syndicate in particular was the detail that like Megamind used to be a part of it. The Doom Syndicate was an old team of villains that Megamind was a part of, which that was not established in the first movie. In the first movie, Megamind grew up alone. He had no crew. It was just him and Minion, and that was it. And this movie just completely retconned it like it was nothing. So the Doom Syndicate do appear in this show in a few episodes. However, not once is it ever stated that like, oh yeah, Megamind used to be a part of the Doom Syndicate or anything like that. You could watch the first movie and then completely skip the Doom Syndicate movie and then just go straight to this and you wouldn't really miss out on much. There aren't really that many important details that you're missing out on. Honestly, I don't really have a problem with the Doom Syndicate themselves. Obviously, they are nowhere near as good as Titan, the villain from the first movie, but I guess they're fine for what they are. If it weren't for that detail that Megamind used to be a member of the Doom Syndicate, then I wouldn't care about these at all. I wouldn't care about the Doom Syndicate. I wouldn't really have any problems with them. I wouldn't consider them good villains, but I wouldn't really care about them either. I wouldn't say there's anything bad about them, aside from the fact that they're just generic Saturday morning cartoon villains. It's the fact that Megamind apparently used to be a member of the Doom Syndicate. That's what gets to me. It's that one little detail that bothers me. But aside from that, I don't really care about the Doom Syndicate all that much. So as I mentioned before in the initial review that I made for it, the Doom Syndicate movie has a post-credits scene where the Syndicate is visited by this purple floating brain that claims to be a mentor for Megamind. Someone who taught Megamind how to be evil, which again retcons the first movie. Because in the first movie, at the very beginning of it, it's established that Megamind was raised by prisoners into becoming evil. This purple brain mentor for Megamind, that's a sentence that I just said, appears occasionally in some episodes. However, it's not until the penultimate episode where he becomes a lot more important. Throughout the show, several members of the Doom Syndicate try and bring in important items from Megamind in order to help resurrect this guy, I guess. Megamind accidentally did something to this guy that caused him to just become a floating brain, and I guess that's what caused him to go from being a villain to being a supervillain. I don't know. It's stupid crap that shouldn't be considered canon, so I don't see the point in going into detail about this. In the final episode of the show, the mentor manages to convince everyone that he's the hero that Metro City needs and not Megamind, causing everyone to believe that Megamind has become a villain again. The series ends with Megamind and everyone else trying to look for Metro Man, obviously setting up a season 2 that is for sure not going to happen. Not a lot of people really know about this show. It isn't as infamous as the Doom Syndicate movie, even though it came out literally the exact same day. And the very few reviews that are available for this show, they're mostly negative. This might be one of the most positive reviews, if not the most positive review that this show will ever get. And it's not even a positive review. I'm not saying that I like this show. I'm just saying it's not as terrible as I expected it to be. A lot of the things that made the Doom Syndicate movie bad are considerably more forgivable for this show. Truth be told, if this aired on Nickelodeon in 2011 or 2012, I don't think anyone would really think much about it. You could literally put this show alongside whatever Nickelodeon was airing in the early 2010s, and for better or worse, it would fit in perfectly. You could put this alongside the Penguins of Madagascar or TMNT 2012 and it wouldn't stand out at all. I guess it just boils down to the show coming out too late. Simple as that. This came out over 10 years after the original Megamind, when in reality this should have come out no later than 2014. Much like the Doom Syndicate movie, this does feel like it's trying to be for a younger audience when compared to the original Megamind, which doesn't work because kids nowadays aren't going to know about Megamind. They're not going to know about this niche Dreamworks movie from 2010. If this came out in the early 2010s, then having it be dumbed down for a younger audience wouldn't be that much of a problem. But it came out this year in 2024, and I'd say that greatly hinders it. It's interesting to note that initially only the TV show was announced and not the sequel. I've mentioned before how back in 2022, it was announced that we were getting a new Megamind series. We didn't know that we were getting a sequel as well. And then, at the beginning of February 2024, we receive a trailer for the sequel, which only very briefly mentions the TV show at the end of it. And all of the footage that's featured in the trailer is from the Doom Syndicate movie. None of it is from the Megamind Rules TV show. So aside from the brief synopsis that we received from the show's initial 2022 announcement, where it would focus on Megamind becoming a superhero influencer, we knew nothing about this show for basically 2 years. Oh yeah, let's talk about the influencer stuff. Yes, the show does occasionally show Megamind trying to be a superhero influencer. However, it's surprisingly rare. I thought that was going to be the main focus of the show, but no. You barely see it in the show. Only one of these episodes is actually dedicated to the influencer stuff, that being the first episode. In the first episode, there's a new character introduced named Dude Monkey, who's meant to be another superhero influencer, one that tries to be hip and cool with the kids, trying to convince Metro City that Megamind is old and unhip and uncool and whatever. And as a result of that, Megamind and Minion team up with the annoying influencer girl from the Doom Syndicate movie to try and learn a lot more about the internet. Now, this is undeniably how do you do fellow kids material, but hear me out on this. It's not really that cringy in a way. It's kind of okay, actually. See, the joke is Megamind and Minion are super out of touch with what's popular on the internet. And so they think that referencing extremely old memes from the 2000s is funny. There's a brief reference to the dancing baby meme, which I believe is one of, if not the very first meme ever. And there's also a brief reference to Chocolate Rain, a meme from 2007. That is pretty much where the meme references end. It's just those two and that's it, for better or worse. It's surprisingly not as bad as I would have expected it to be. I thought it would be something where it's like Megamind would say Ohio Skibbity Riz or some stupid shit like that, but no. The idea of Megamind being really out of touch with the internet, and so he thinks that like referencing late 2000s memes is funny, that's actually not a bad idea. that's actually kind of decent. It's undeniably How Do You Do Fellow Kids, but it's still like, it's kind of not that bad. It's a rare instance where How Do You Do Fellow Kids isn't cringy as hell. And again, only in the first episode is the influencer stuff ever really truly explored. It does appear from time to time in subsequent episodes, but not that much, and most of the episodes just straight up don't acknowledge it at all. I'm guessing maybe the influencer stuff was originally going to be more prominent in the show, but then during development, midway into it, they decided to tone it down, so, you know, that's props to the people behind this show for that, I guess. As I said, the show does share a few of the problems that I have with the Doom Syndicate movie. Most of the shared flaws that this show has with the Doom Syndicate movie, I'm more willing to forgive for this because this is a TV show. And I guess this could also apply to the next flaw that I'm going to bring up, but none of the charm that the first film had, none of the clever themes or subversions of the superhero genre that the first film had are present in this show. Again, I guess in a way this is a little bit more forgivable because like you can't expect the themes from Megamind or anything like that to be in this show because it's a much lower budget, cheaper show. I think it would be better to just not replicate the themes or subversions that the first Megamind had rather than try and recreate them and just have them be very poor because of the lower budget. That's just me though. Now, even though I don't think this show is as bad as the Doom Syndicate movie, in fact, I don't think this is that bad at all. It's obviously still not a very good show. Around like the latter half of the show, like around the latter 4 episodes, I just started to think, you know what, I really miss the charm of the first film. I miss like everything that made it good is just not in this show. It's not as bad as the Doom Syndicate movie, but that doesn't mean that it's good. It is for sure nowhere near as good as the original movie. And it just got me thinking a lot more about what should have happened with Megamind. What should have been Megamind's future. Because Megamind's in that weird in-between area where there's a lot of good ideas here and there for a Megamind follow-up. Hell, I'll just go ahead and admit that both this and the Doom Syndicate movie have good ideas in them that could work for a Megamind sequel, but then at the same time there's a part of me that thinks, you know what, maybe Megamind should have just stayed a standalone movie. I mean, I guess we could have the Button of Doom as like a little aftermath epilogue thing, but that's about it really. Have the movie end with Megamind becoming a superhero and just leave it to our imagination to think about Megamind protecting Metro City not long after he took over it. It's kind of the same thing with what Despicable Me should have done. All the subsequent movies focused on Gru being a good guy and not despicable, despite the name of the movie. And that's part of the reason why the Despicable Me sequels aren't as good as the first movie. Obviously, none of the Despicable Me sequels have the same level of quality as Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate, but still. Maybe it would have been better if Megamind never got a follow-up at all. I'm not even saying that because these two things are bad. It's just, even if they were good, I feel like maybe Megamind would have been better as a standalone thing. I remember years ago thinking, you know what, it would have been great if Megamind got a sequel, but then at the same time, I feel like that would just kind of take away from what made the first movie good. And even if we got a Megamind sequel that had the same animation quality as the first movie, and it had like Will Ferrell and David Cross, whatever, reprising their roles, even then, they could still somehow find a way to f*** it up. It's entirely possible. In the previous videos that I would make about Megamind's comeback, I would frequently compare Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate to The Incredibles 2. Incredibles 2 is not some cheap, low-budget sequel like Megamind 2 is. It has a higher budget, I want to imagine, than the first Incredibles. It has a lot of the voice actors, the same crew, it has a lot of the stuff that the first film had behind the scenes. But it just wasn't as good. A lot of what made the first Incredibles good wasn't present in Incredibles 2, even though Incredibles 2 is on the same level of quality. Actually, no, I'd say it's higher quality than Incredibles 1, in terms of like the animation and whatever. Incredibles 2 surpasses Incredibles 1 in terms of its animation. It has the same voice actors from the first movie reprising their role. It has Brad Bird. Everyone involved in the first film came back for this sequel, and yet it just wasn't as good. The writing wasn't as good. The themes that the first film had weren't present in Incredibles 2. A lot of what made the first Incredibles so good is just not there in Incredibles 2. Incredibles 2 is a movie that's like, you're only really able to enjoy it when you forget about how great the first Incredibles was. And then once you remember how the first Incredibles was, all of a sudden Incredibles 2 was just nowhere near as good. And I feel that if we had gotten a proper Megamind 2 that had the same animation quality as the first film, and it had Will Ferrell and David Cross and whatever back to voice Megamind and Minion, it would still run the risk of just not being as good as the first Megamind. There would still be a chance that everything that made the first Megamind good could be missing in this hypothetical Megamind sequel. Having great animation and having Will Ferrell voice Megamind again, that's not enough to make a good Megamind sequel. You're gonna need a lot more things than that. I hate the fact that Megamind never became a big movie for Dreamworks, but I feel like in order for that to happen, it would need sequels or like a TV show or like any sort of follow-up. You can't become one of the most successful Dreamworks franchises if you don't have a franchise, if you just have one movie and that's it, and maybe a 15-minute short. You're gonna need a lot more than that. But at the same time, I feel like maybe, just maybe, it would have been better if Megamind just stayed as a one-time thing. It would have been better if Megamind was just a standalone film and that's it. We get to see Megamind's journey from being a supervillain all the way to becoming a superhero. And then once the movie ends, it's just left up to our imaginations what it's like having Megamind as a superhero now, after years of being a supervillain. I don't think Megamind Rules is as bad as Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate, but it is still not that good of a show. It does share a lot of the flaws that the Doom Syndicate movie has, but again, it's a lot more forgivable for this since this is a TV show. And there are a couple things that make it somewhat okay, better than I initially expected it to be. But much like with the Doom Syndicate movie, a lot of the charm that the first film had, a lot of what made the first film good is just not present in this show. Again, if this came out in 2012 on Nickelodeon, then there would probably be no problem at all, but having this come out in 2024 just makes it feel extra insulting. It's the same thing as the Doom Syndicate movie. They both came out too late. If this came out much closer to the first film's release, then there would probably be no issues, but alas, it came out over 10 years after the first movie, and I feel like in a way that just kind of adds to the insulting nature, even if this is again nowhere near as insulting as the Doom Syndicate movie. As it stands, this is just a cartoon, one of the cartoons that I've ever seen. A lot of what I've said about the Doom Syndicate movie could also apply to this show, some of which I'm willing to forgive for this because this is a TV show, but yeah, this is just not very good. I do think that Megamind deserves better. Honestly, I kind of wish they just left the Megamind alone. I wish they didn't make like a follow-up. Maybe it would have been better if Megamind just stayed as a one-time standalone movie and that's it. I don't know. Megamind Rules is unironically better than Has-Been Hotel though, I'll give it that. Sorry not sorry. Anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing as it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I will see you all next time. Adios.